Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Dean Ciriaco Show, which is a terrible name, but I can't really think of anything else at the moment, anything clever or stupid. And I don't really know, it's not going to be Red Sox focused. Obviously, see I have a bunch of Red Sox stuff here, but it's not going to be Red Sox focused. It's going to live on the Skipper's View YouTube channel. It's going to have its own podcast feed. But I just wanted to kind of have a spot to my top 10. So this episode, obviously, you can see from the title, is top 10 Centerfielders of all time, which is the blog I just finished, which is coming out the same day that this video will be coming out. This podcast will be coming out. But I think, one, I want to branch the Skipper's View out in terms of kind of what we have content-wise. I don't want everything to just have to be on the main podcast feed. It feels weird. It feels out of place to kind of put a Dean Ciriaco-led episode of top 10s or baseball history, which I like talking about. And then after that, having Brett and Sam and Will or Nick or whoever, Mikey, talking about baseball news. It feels out of place. This also allows me to kind of I interviewed different authors last year and had a lot of different conversations, and this will kind of allow me to, and again, those felt out of place. So that felt out of place to have an interview with a Dan Evans, or Adam Lazarus or Joe Poznanski, and then kind of have an episode about the games from the weekend. So this allows me to kind of have freedom in terms of what I want to do when I want to do it. I think just with kind of the way I want things to go forward with the Skipper's View, I think this just makes the most sense. It makes the most sense to have the ability for myself to jump on and kind of just talk about whatever I want to talk about in the baseball world. It's obviously just going to stick baseball. It's not going to be anything else. But right now, keeping it the Dean Ciriaco Show, just because I don't really know. I don't really want to come up with a clever name, to be honest with you, and I see some terrible names out there for podcasts. Again, these videos for now will live kind of on the main Skipper's View YouTube channel. That's something I have to talk about with Brett because I just want to figure out kind of what we do there. But so today's episode is just me talking about my top 10 Centerfielders of all time. If you haven't seen, I've been doing top 10s for every position. So this episode is actually one of the last blogs I'm writing. So I'm going to go back and record episodes about the other positions, but you can kind of go check those blogs out already on the website, on the Dean blog section, and you can see what I ranked everyone. I have right field and pitchers left. So center field is the third to last blog that I'll be writing. It'll be coming out today, the same day that this video is coming out. But you'll kind of see it here, a little preview. And this is actually the back end of the website, because this is still a draft, so you'll see some edits that I can make. But just kind of running through it. The beginning of the blog just is me talking about if people want to subscribe to the website for money. People have been asking if they subscribe, which I'm not asking anyone to subscribe. I'm going to make that clear. People have subscribed for money, and they've asked that they get extra content for subscribing, and I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to go down that road of you click on a blog or you click on something that we're putting out or one of our writers is putting out and there's a paywall. I will never do that. You can subscribe. You'll get the same content as everyone else, but all that money is just going to kind of go towards the writers so that they can keep pumping out blogs. So yeah, that kind of just covering that just answers what people have been asking me. But I love writing this blog, the top 10 Centerfielders of all time. It's, again, the rules that I've set up is difficult it can be difficult because I'm leaving Negro League players out for now. I'm going to make separate lists for them. I'm also leaving out anyone who cheated, in my eyes cheated, in terms of steroids, or players that are banned from baseball. So if center field there's not too many of that. You see a lot in left field, and so that's why left field is very difficult. So when I go and talk about that uh, on an episode, it's going to be complicated because a lot of people, for example, want Barry Bonds number one, and I it breaks the rules of what I wanted. But if you're looking through the top 15 players in terms of WAR and center field, you're looking at, I'll read them off real quick: Willie Mays, Ty Cobb, Chris Speaker, Mickey Mantle, Mike Trout, Ken Griffey, Joe DiMaggio, Duke Snyder, Carlos Beltran, Kenny Lofton, Andrew Jones, Richie Ashburn, Andrew Dawson, Billy Hamilton, Jim Edmonds. I can keep going, and you don't really hit any like steroid guys. So center field is kind of safe. If I were doing Negro League players, I probably would have Cool Papa Bell on this list. I definitely would, honestly. But I'm going to do a separate list for that to kind of give them their due. I went over that in one of the early blogs. If you want to go back and read that, you can. But yeah, so Andre Dawson is my number 10, and I went back and forth on this. He has an MVP. There are some people, he was elected later on, and there's some people that believe that he is an undeserving Hall of Famer. I don't think he's an undeserving Hall of Famer. When you look at those draw rankings, he's right there. He's 13. He's 13 in WAR. He is 14th in WAR 7, and he is 13th in JAWS. So, look, the people ahead of him, like 3 guys ahead of him, you were thinking like, okay, well, how did I get to this 10? Andrew Jones, Kenny Lofton, Richie Ashburn, and Carlos Beltran. Richie Ashburn, great player. He's another player that got in very late, later on. Okay, he finished, I think Ashburn's career ended in like 1962. I think he got elected in like the 90s. So we're looking at like 30 years. Dawson was like 20 years or 25 years between finishing, or 15 years between finishing and getting elected to the Hall of Fame. Dawson has an MVP. Was that MVP undeserving? I would say, yeah. I think again now, like looking back at like WAR and like production, if this is 2025, he wouldn't have won it. His one MVP, he had 4 WAR, but he had 49 home runs and 137 RBIs, both leading the league. Tony Gwynn led the league in WAR that year of 8.6, and he batted 370. So this is also the season, I had mentioned this earlier in an earlier blog, that Ozzie Smith, who was a runner-up in MVP, had 0 home runs. So it's a funny thing. Dawson has kind of kept coming up as I've gone through these rankings. But I'm putting him top 10. He's an 8-time Gold Glove winner. He's a 4-time Silver Slugger. He has an MVP. He does not have any World Series. Obviously, he played with 3 not great teams or 4 not great teams. You have the Montreal Expos, you have the Chicago Cubs, you have the Red Sox in like the early 90s, and then you have the Florida Marlins when they were first formed. So he never really got to see too much postseason. But from 1979 to 1991, so from the ages of 24 to 36, he was a serviceable, above average to great player. He got a bunch of MVP votes. He got an MVP. He was a runner-up in MVP in 1981, and he got all those Gold Gloves. So Dawson, I'm not going to talk more about him, but he's my number 10 guy for now. Now, number 9, Kirby Puckett. Puckett is much lower on the rankings in terms of BWAR, WAR 7, and JAWS, like 20 and 24 sometimes of some of those. However, I often overlook him, and my dad had pointed it out. And it was funny because one day when I was at the card store that I work at, someone had said Kirby Puckett's like one of the worst Hall of Famers of all time. And then I went and looked at his numbers, and I fell into that trap of just looking at like hits, home runs, and things like that. And I looked at his hits, 2,304. I looked at his home runs, 207. And I was like, oh yeah, like why is he in the Hall of Fame? That's a trap you don't want to fall into. And if you look at this photo, it's kind of tough to see. And for those listening, it's his baseball reference page. And from 1984 to 1995, I always look at the right side, and I look at awards. If that's filled up, you know that's a great player. And there's no gaps. He was 3rd Rookie of the Year. He got MVP votes almost every single year. He was an All-Star from 86 till he retired in 95 or after 95. Never won an MVP. but was consistently getting Gold Gloves and Silver Sluggers. He was 6-time Gold Glove winner, 6-time Silver Slugger winner, 2-time World Series champion in '87 and '91. And both of those years, he was great. His postseason numbers: 309 batting average, 5 home runs, 16 RBIs, and 16 runs scored in 24 games in the postseason for his career. His career ended 35. I think he's 35. He's not. I don't think he would have gone and gotten 3,000 hits necessarily, but he woke up one day and he was blind in his right eye, and he had multiple surgeries. Eyesight never came back. He obviously had to retire from Major League Baseball, and he unfortunately passed away young. He kind of ballooned in weight after his playing days, and yeah, I like if you look at just like consistency and peak, he's right there with some of these other guys in terms of just production. And you throw in the MVPs in the postseason that he got, and you throw in the World Series, and I decided to put him at 9. And look, you want to put a Beltran in, that's fine. I saw Carlos Beltran play, and I'm not like, when I think Hall of Famers, great players, like Beltran doesn't pop into my head. So if you want to put Beltran here, like 10 or 9, like you're totally welcome to. I don't. And he also was part of the cheating scandal. So whatever. Duke Snider is my number 8, and you can see here I'm actually like kind of like adding a little as I go along before I publish this later tonight. But Snider, Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, all center fielders in New York at the same time. I just growing up always, because my grandfather and my dad, like those 3 names were always being brought up, and I in my head was always like Duke Snider's right there with these guys. When you look at it, he's not. Statistics wise, he was still great, but stats wise, he was not. He was not a Willie Mays, which we'll get to, and he was not a Mickey Mantle either. He doesn't have the like allure of Mantle. One, he doesn't have the stats of Mantle, but he also doesn't have the allure of Mantle, and then he's just nowhere close to Mays. And we're going to go over his stats in a little while here. But he's still a 2-term World Series champion. He's got over 2,100 hits. He's got over 400 home runs. He's got like a 295 batting average, so he's right there. He was the 3rd best center fielder in New York during the golden age of baseball, but he's still one of the best center fielders of all time. So I think he does get overlooked, and I think that's unfortunate. And he never, like, he had a couple great years, so he had like a 4-year span. So from like 1950 till let's say 1957, he was averaging like 6 WAR, I think, from what I can tell, just doing quick math. So 5.6, 3.7, 4.5, 9.1, 8.1, 8.6, 7.6, and 5. But then he just falls off, and he falls off pretty early in his career. 30 years old, he kind of turns into like an above average player. He still hits for decent average, but he's not a Willie Mays who for 20 years is producing, or a Mickey Mantle who's also producing for way longer than they should be, considering he had a 20 ACL the entire time. So for Snider, I think he had a really great peak, which is, you can see by looking at his baseball reference page, and then he kind of just fell off. Now, what I kind of reference here in the blog is the song Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, which I won't play for copyright reasons, but you should go listen to it, because it's been renamed Talking Baseball, which I think is where the Talking Baseball guys got their name. But in it, it's talking about all the greats of baseball, and the chorus is Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. And I remember listening to the song as a child, which is one of the reasons Duke Snider always pops into my head. I have like 2 Duke Snider autographs, because they're not that expensive. They're pretty easy to get. Yes, we have my number 8 center fielder of all time. Number 7, and this is where I think some controversy will start to come in, is Ken Griffey Jr. I read about it here, and I think it's true. I saw Ken Griffey Jr. I saw not great player. He had one good season, I believe, in 2005, where he kind of hit 35 home runs, I believe, that season. I remember, look, I knew Ken Griffey Jr. was great. I was a lover of baseball history. I would watch highlights on like DVDs of like great plays from like the 90s. But in like MLB The Show, I would always take Ken Griffey Jr., put him on my team, make him a 99 overall, and like extend his career. But yeah, 2005, he hit 35 home runs, 92 RBIs, 301. Got MVP votes that year. Same as Duke Snider. He turned 30 and he fell off a cliff. And from the ages of 31 to 40, he produced like 2 WAR, I believe. Just doing maybe higher than that, maybe like 3 WAR. Just doing some quick math, looking at it. But those were the years that I was growing up watching baseball. So 2001, I was 7. 2010, I was 16. So those are really formative years. And everyone's telling me how great Ken Griffey Jr. is, and I'm just seeing a guy who is not great. And if you look at the other players in these lists, Trout, including my Trout, from number 6 down, these guys never really fell off. But you never see Joe DiMaggio, I'll kind of just like move on to him. Joe DiMaggio never fell off. Again, watching highlights, I only got to watch highlights of Joe DiMaggio. They're all great. And then you go look at his baseball reference page, it's all great. Yeah, like again, if you look at like his counting stats, like 361 home runs, 2,214 hits, but then you look at his at-bats and how many games he actually played, and like you average that out, and then you look at him losing 3 of his prime years to World War I, retiring early, and yeah, you get someone who DiMaggio is top 20, top 15 all time. He's 6 on this list, and he's still like top 15 all time just because of how stacked center field is. But again, he lost the ages 28, 29, 30 to the war, and he retired at the age of 36. I kind of want to like do episodes about individual players because his retirement is pretty interesting. And you take it into his like personal life and everything. And DiMaggio is just again a really interesting like character in like baseball history. But yeah, again, he never had a negative WAR season. His lowest like WAR season ever was his last season at 2.9. Every other year he produced 4.3 or better. Every year. And that 4.3 was at 34 years old. So he was super productive. He hit more home runs than he struck out 7 times. And he did it 5 times in a row from 37 to 41. So again, like I'm biased because I'm a Red Sox fan, and I actually put DiMaggio and Williams' stats here and compare them, which is it's not really fair to compare because Williams played 500 more games. Williams also lost like 5 years to WAR also, but Williams is just a better player. I just wanted to next to each other to remind everyone that because the one thing that like obviously DiMaggio has more World Series, but like as a player, individual, DiMaggio has 6 more stolen bases and he has an extra MVP. If you know baseball history, you know that Ted Williams was not loved by the guys who would be voting on the MVP. Williams deserved at least 3 or 4 MVPs, which would have put him above DiMaggio. So just a little Williams hype there. On number 5 is Tris Speaker, and I already feel like I'm going to accept grandma's changes here. Like I'm going to change this because I have Trout at number 4, and I might keep Trout at number 4. But then if I like revisit these next year, probably going to end up changing it because when you look at Speaker, he played, and I always love these types of players. Like Cobb falls into this this window as well, where they play in the dead ball era, so the beginning of the dead ball era, and then their mid to late career is entering like the 20s and 30s, where you go from kind of small ball, bunting, no home runs, and then you enter like the Babe Ruth era of baseball, where the home run now becomes a huge part of the game, and the game completely changes during the 20s and 30s. And Speaker kind of overlaps on that. He was a Red Sox player, and he was actually teammates with Babe Ruth. And when Speaker was traded to the Indians after the 1915 season, when they won the World Series against the Phillies, they thought that Red Sox fans thought there was never going to be a worse trade than the Red Sox sending Tris Speaker to the Indians. That was it. That was going to be the worst trade in Red Sox history. And then a few years later, they traded Babe Ruth. But all-time leader in doubles. is, if you're looking at players with, I think it's 5,000. I kind of say 3,000 here, but I'm kind of changing it. With 5,000 play appearances or more, he's fifth all-time batting average. And one of those players is Shoeless Joe Jackson. He has like 5,500 play appearances. When you go to like higher than that, so like 7,500 or more, then Speaker's the fourth highest batting average with 345. But again, all-time leader in steals, in doubles. And then he is fifth all-time in just total hits as well, with 3,514, 436 stolen bases, 135 B WAR, 62.7 WAR 7, and 98.8 JAWS. If you look at this list, the top 3 or 4, I think, are pretty obvious. I think a lot of people would probably put Speaker 3 or 4 at least, maybe even 3 if you want to put over Mantle. I gave Mantle the edge here, as you'll see in a moment. And I'm giving Trout the benefit of the doubt. So my number 4 center fielder of all time is Mike Trout, just because his peak, one, I got to watch it, right? So I got to watch Mike Trout's peak, where he was the greatest baseball player we've ever seen, and was on track to be like the greatest player ever. And now, obviously, that has changed with injuries and just being on the Angels. Like I said with Griffey, it's like if I, for 5 more years, watch Trout kind of just like be injured and not really do anything, Trout's going to fall way back on my list. I'm putting him at number 4 right now, kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt, but really he should be at least 6. He should be behind DiMaggio. I don't know, like, you could argue he should be behind Griffey, but I'm putting him way up right now just because I'm a Mike Trout fan. I defended Mike Trout because I feel like a lot of people in the past couple of years have just forgotten how amazing he was during the 2010s. He's got 3 MVPs, 11 All-Stars, 9 Silver Sluggers. He's actually not a great defensive player, which everyone forgets about because they just think of the one home run catch when he was a rookie where he slams into the wall, like kind of like flips the ball in his glove. But he's not a great defensive player, and so he doesn't really have gold gloves. But probably should have 5 MVPs. And yeah, it sucks that he's kind of just fallen apart over the last couple of years. But even when he does play, he's still great. He just can't stay on the field. So let's see what happens over the next 3, 4, 5 years as he enters his like mid to late 30s. And if he can reach that 500 home run mark, if he can reach that, he's got to reach 2,000 hits. If he doesn't, then again, I just don't know where he's going to fall on this list. But right now, I'm putting him here, and I don't feel great about it. But let's get into the top 3. Number 3, Mickey Mantle. So 110 WAR, 64 WAR 7, 87.5 JAWS, 3-time MVP, 16-time All-Star, 7-time World Series champion, most expensive baseball card in the world, him and Honus Wagner, kind of goes back and forth. Over 500 home runs. Doesn't have that many stolen bases because they didn't want him to steal because of his knee. And I don't you'll see here and you'll see in the blog, you talk about Mantle and say he would have been the best player of all time if he didn't tear his ACL in the 1951 World Series, an ACL that they never fixed, which is crazy. So he played the rest of his career with that torn ACL, which is mind-boggling to me. But again, the way he treated his body in terms of alcohol and smoking, and he admits this, which is why I'm saying it, that's what destroyed him. And I think we know now, years later, treat your body like that, you're going to constantly kind of just break down. That's what happened. He kept breaking down. He kept getting injured. He put up insane numbers while pretty much just taped together for his entire career. I think they said it's like his entire leg had to be wrapped up essentially for his knee to not just fall apart every game. So in my researching these blogs, I ended up watching Mickey Mantle's funeral, which I don't suggest going and watching it, but it's interesting. You see some baseball greats, Yogi Berra being one. But in that, a lot of times when I go on social media, I just see Mickey Mantle stories, and it's usually about him doing some not so nice things in his personal life. But what's often overlooked is the fact that he did get sober. He did find God in his later life, and I think that should be highlighted more. So what I did here in the blog, I won't read this poem just for time's sake, but he wanted this to be read, and it was read by one of his former Yankee teammates. It's called God's Hall of Fame by Walt Huntley. And if you go check out the blog, you can kind of read this poem. So I think it speaks a lot that this is what Mantle wanted read at his funeral, and that's something that I didn't realize he got sober, and I didn't realize that he found God and became a devout Christian near the end of his life. So that's something, rather than all the accolades, that's something I wanted to kind of point out. So, all right, number 2, Ty Cobb. One of my favorite poems of all time is an ABC of Baseball Memorials by Ogden Nash, or Lineup for yesterday, ABC of Baseball Memorials for Ogden Nash. If you ever watched Ken Burns' baseball, gets referenced a lot in that. But I always love the line for Cobb. C is for Cobb, who grew spikes in that corn, made all the basemen which they weren't born. That's referencing the fact that there was this myth, and I said myth because it's proven that Cobb would sharpen his cleats. Now, did he try to cleat people? I think, yeah, he did. Was he an asshole? Yeah, he was. Was he a racist? This terrible, terrible person that he was kind of portrayed as in the movie that starred Tommy Lee Jones? No. It was a really good book. It's called Ty Cobb with Terrible Beauty. And it was written by Charles Lewison, who I might actually have on this podcast now. And it just debunks all of this previous, all the previous myths and inaccuracies about Cobb in terms of, like, for example, like him being like this like crazy racist. So I really suggest anyone. That's a perfect example. Brett watched the baseball, Ken Burns baseball. Ken Burns rips Cobb apart in that. If you've ever seen it, he says that Cobb is essentially a black spot on the game of baseball, which I just completely agree. He's a top 3 player, top 4 player of all time. And he was just an ultra competitor and a killer. Like, and when I mean killer, I mean just like he was a killer competitor. And I reference it in the blog, but I just think that ultra competitors like Ty Cobb, Ted Williams being one, Michael Jordan, they make people uncomfortable because regular people they just see a crazy person and they can't relate to that level of just being that type of competitor, and they can't kind of put themselves in those shoes because to them it's just completely unfathomable that someone would be that competitive. But again, in sports, you see that. We talked yesterday in our group chat about like high school, college athletes and like recruiting and all those other things, and like it was a heated conversation in one of the group chats, and actually both of them it kind of got heated. But something that I think is just overlooked, where it's like, oh, you have to play D2 or D3, and this is a major issue that I see in my coaching. One, that's just not true, but two, it's like if you're actually just a killer competitor, like you're not going to roll over because you didn't make a team or you didn't get recruited by like a top D1 school or something. I think again that just level of the sport and level of competitive spirit is rare. That makes people uncomfortable. And you saw in The Last Dance with Jordan, it's like he says when people see this, they're going to say, well, he wasn't a nice guy, he was kind of a tyrant. Because that's you, because you never won anything. I wanted to win, but I wanted them to win, be a part of that as well. And something since The Last Dance, everyone kind of says like, oh yeah, Jordan was yeah, I just don't think, me personally, through conversations with people and like through reading about Cobb more and more, it's like his teammates hated him, but you know what? Michael Jordan's teammates hated him. His competitors hated him, but Jordan's competitors at the time, they respected him, but they hated him. Look at the Detroit Pistons and what they did to him. So yeah, was Cobb a killer and a competitor? Yeah. His teammates hated him? Yeah. But his opponents feared him. He was one of the best baseball players of all time. I think you pick Ty Cobb up, put him in 2025, give him a little time to adjust. I think he's just as great of a player. I know Will from Overdue Sports is going to say he was playing uniforms. He doesn't count, but I don't. I think what Will doesn't take into account is again, if you have that competitive spirit in you that a Ty Cobb clearly had, it doesn't matter who you're playing. So he picked Ty Cobb up, put him here in 25, put him against whoever the best pitcher is right now, or whoever you think the best pitcher is right now. Give him a few weeks to adjust. He's going to be just as good as he was in the early 1900s. That's just my opinion. And then the number one greatest center fielder of all time, and by many people's metrics, the greatest player of all time, that's Willie Mays. And for time's sake, I'm going to show this. Okay. If you're not watching, this is a baseball reference stat head comparison of Snyder, Mantle, and Willie Mays. Okay. So Snyder's WAR 65.9, Mantle's WAR 110.2, Willie Mays' WAR 156.2. Mays lost a couple years to the war. If Willie Mays doesn't lose those years to the Korean War, you could take Mickey Mantle and you can take Duke Snyder, combine them, and it wouldn't equal what Mays' WAR was, or they pretty much would equal what Mays' WAR was. And I think that's just crazy. Where you have two of the top 10 center fielders of all time. Mantle's probably the top 10, top 8 player of all time. Them combined can barely match Willie Mays. Mays had 12 Gold Gloves. He had a batting title. He had 2 MVPs. Deserved more. 24 All-Star games. Only 1 World Series, so Mantle gets some also with the MVPs. But just run through his stats real quick. 12,545 plate appearances, 3,293 hits, 616 home runs, 1,909 RBIs, 339 stolen bases, 301 batting average, 384 on base percentage, 557 slugging, 940 OPS, and a 155 OPS plus. Again, would he have catched Mays? Would he have catched Ruth in home runs if he didn't have to go and miss essentially 2 years for the Korean War? I don't think so. But I think it's safe to say, he was averaging like 10 WAR those seasons. So he came back from the war and produced 10.5 WAR and 9.2 WAR right away. I think it's safe to say that at the age of 22, playing the way he was, I would have produced at least 10 WAR there. And in 1952, when he was 21, probably would have produced at least 5 WAR there. And again, like I said, you take Mantle and Snyder, put them together in terms of like WAR, and Mays pretty much matches them. So I could talk about Mays for a while. There's a great documentary that was on HBO that I think I sent to Brett for him to watch, that I also suggest everyone go and watch. It actually like made me like Barry Bonds more. So that I don't like Barry Bonds. I think he's a cheater. I don't think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he deserves to be on these lists. But watching that documentary about Willie Mays made me like Barry Bonds more, and that's a testament to Willie Mays, not Barry Bonds. So everyone should kind of go check that out. I am way over. I want these to be like 15 minutes. I don't know how I'm going to do that, honestly. Eventually, I'm going to need to like do some graphics and kind of video with these if I want to cut them down. This is very much more long-form me talking than kind of what I want these top 10s to be. They're not top 10s that you see on like YouTube or on TV, where it's like 30